Hi everyone, welcome back to Mea Sententia. Today's video is going to focus on resources for reading ancient literature. I'll be speaking about Latin and Greek in particular, since those are the languages I primarily work with and feel the most qualified to speak about. Before we dive in, a quick disclaimer. Everything I say here is Mea Sententia, my opinion, based on my own experiences as both a student and teacher. Different readers will have different preferences, and that's totally valid. I've divided this video into two main sections, reading text in translation and reading them in the original language. I've included timestamps in the description down below, so feel free to skip to whichever part is most helpful to you. Let's start with translations. Penguin Classics is one of the best-known series out there. They're a great entry-level option, accessible, affordable, and widely available in both new and second-hand bookstores. Bear in mind that many secondhand copies will be heavily annotated, since they're frequently assigned in high school and undergrad courses. Each volume typically comes with a solid introduction and helpful notes at the back, covering translation choices, cultural references, or historical context. Oxford World's Classics editions are pretty comparable to Penguin's. In my opinion, they tend to have slightly more detailed introductions and notes. Both Penguins and OWCs are meant for broad readerships. They typically aim for translations that are more literal than poetic, which brings me to a brief note on the inherent challenges of reading in translation. Balancing literal fidelity with literary impact as a translator is really difficult. Something is always going to get lost in translation. That's why I advocate for reading text in the original language whenever possible, but I know that's not realistic for many people. So, if you're reading in translation, I recommend paying close attention to the translator's introduction and notes. Understanding their approach helps you decide whether that edition aligns with what you want to get out of the text. This is especially important for poetry. Translators make big decisions about how to handle meter. Emily Wilson, for example, prioritizes the musicality or rhythm of Homeric poetry, rendering both the Iliad and Odyssey into iambic pentameter as an English equivalent for the original dactylic hexameter. This gives a very different effect than that of a free verse translation like Barry Powell's. Neither approach is necessarily better, but they do shape your reading experience. Finally, we have the Loeb Classical Library. Loebs are unique because they present the original Greek or Latin text on one page with the English translation facing it. They're fantastic for bridging the gap between translation and original language. If you're mostly reading in English, you can still look over and peek at the original to see what choices the translator made. If you're reading in Latin or Greek, the facing translation can provide support with tricky vocabulary or syntax. Personally, the Loebs are my go-to for casual reading since you can get through large amounts of text without needing to stop and consult a dictionary. There's also the digital Loeb Classical Library, which gives you online access to over 520 volumes of Greek and Latin texts. It's not cheap, $175 for the first year, then $100 a year after that. If you don't have institutional access, it's worth looking into professional organizations like Cain or CAMWIS, which include access with membership. Now let's talk about resources for those of you who want to read Latin and Greek texts in the original language. If you finish the introductory grammar sequence but still feel shaky about diving into authors like Cicero or Homer, novellas are a great low-stress way to build up your confidence in reading proficiency. Most novellas shelter vocabulary, providing frequent exposure to core vocab and allowing students to read large amounts of text without constantly turning to a dictionary. There are substantially more Latin than Greek novellas on the market. It's also worth noting that most novellas are self-published and the quality can vary. I highly recommend Andrew Olympi and Emma Vanderpool's novellas. Both I and my students have really enjoyed working with them. I'll link some of my favorites in the description below. On the Greek side of things, I've heard good things about John Folke's novellas, though I haven't personally used them in my own teaching. Tiered readers are another excellent tool. They take a passage from an authentic author and present it in stages, starting with simplified grammar and syntax and gradually ramping up to the original. This scaffolding helps you grasp the story first, then tackle the stylistic nuances as you move up tiers. Like novellas, they also provide crucial repetition of core vocabulary. Again, I'll link some of my favorites in the description. Next up are transitional readers, which are specialized texts that bridge the gap between basic grammar textbooks and real ancient authors. They ease you into authentic texts with added support, including vocabulary glosses, grammatical explanations, and sometimes guiding questions or exercises. As mentioned earlier, Loebs are also a great resource for reading in the original language. The English on the facing page gives you a bit of a safety net, which can make reading the original much less intimidating. Once you feel comfortable reading text without that level of additional support, the Cambridge Greek and Latin Classics series, nicknamed the Green and Yellows, is an incredible resource. These volumes provide the original text along with detailed commentary focused on grammar, literary analysis, and cultural context. They're designed with undergraduate and graduate students in mind, but anyone with intermediate reading skills can benefit. Finally, for those of you working at the scholarly level, we have Oxford Classical Texts. These are critical editions, meaning they provide what's considered the most reliable version of the text. Unlike the green and yellows, they don't include commentary. Instead, their main feature is the Apparatus Criticus, called the AppCrit for short. An Apparatus Criticus is essentially a record of textual variants across manuscripts and editorial choices. It tells you what alternative readings exist, what emendation scholars have suggested, and why editors chose one or the other. For anyone doing serious philological or textual work, the AppCrit is indispensable. That concludes my quick tour through some of the most common resources for reading ancient literature, both in translation and in the original languages. This is by no means an exhaustive list, and I'd love to hear from you. What are your favorite editions, translations, or tools? Drop your recommendations in the comments below. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.